Hello, hello. Of course, if we are making one DK spec guide for PvP, we are going to be making both. So welcome to the Unholy DK PvP guide post-retail rework, which did not change too much up for us, but there's definitely some changes in there. And they are promising a midnight additional Unholy rework, so we'll see if they deliver on that. But for now, we're going to work with what they gave us. In this guide, I am going to be going over a very fundamental, very traditional build, and one that is completely crazy, outlandish, and out there, and I don't even have the stats to make it work yet, but I'm going to give you all the tools to see if you want to build it and try it yourself. The reason I'm doing that, even though it's completely untested and I don't even have the stats for it yet, is because it is fun. Because otherwise, I think the other build is just ran by everybody and everybody knows it, and this would be a really boring video because it's kind of a video that everybody's already done, and there's a build lurking out there. Call it a unicorn build, call it whatever you want, that could be played, and I don't think a single player has actually tried it with the full setup yet. Like, I'm talking every stat, everything that they could possibly have to make it work. And if you want to be the first, or maybe I will once Conquest Cap gets a little higher, it's really cool because it reminds me of old Unholy rot pressure builds that are from like Mop or Warlords of Draenor that could be really interesting and give you a different win condition that actually works well in the fast stacking dampening of solo shuffle. So I know I'm teasing at this, so I need to get into this as fast as possible so I can explain what the heck I'm talking about. So let's skip the intro and let's go right into it. We're going to start with stats. I'm going to go over all the traditional stuff first, and then I'm going to go over that wacky build all at once at the end. So let's talk traditional. What do I mean by traditional? This talent build right now, we'll get into the talents in the talent section, but here it is on the screen. You can pause it if you want to see what I mean by it, but pretty much everybody's running that in some variation. And which means the stats for that are just mastery, haste, and verse, and some combination of all three. 0 crit at all, mastery, haste, and verse. The only thing you really have to think about is not going over into DR. So like versatility DR is at 30%. So if you go into PvP and you're over 30% verse, then you probably have too much. You need a combination of all three because they all work in tandem. Verse makes you do more damage and more survivable. Mastery makes you do even more damage than verse makes you do, and haste allows you to get the globals off and the resource gen to even do that damage in the first place in the short, finite burst windows of PvP, right? You're not 100% uptime in PvP, though Rider does help with your mobility quite a bit. But you really want to slot this burst damage into short windows so you can get as much pressure off in a short period of time. That is the PvP win condition for most classes. Pretty much every class in the game loves being able to do as much damage in a short period of time as possible. So haste, versatility, and mastery, some combination of all three. Do not get like over, 22% verse, or sorry, 22,000 rating for verse, or 30% verse. Do not get way over these amounts by going all into one stat, because then you would just DR it and you wouldn't have enough of the other stats. That's all I have to say about stats. Now, embellishments. I just have the elemental focusing lens, it's called. It just procs more damage. Unholy is a class that loves oozing as much damage as possible, no matter what build you're running. So here's a way to do even more of that. Here's yet another way of doing even more of that, getting the Reshi wraps that you do with the nice edge 3 out of 5 campaign chapters. It's in this zone over here. I'm not going into that. Go to Wowhead or Google to figure out how to get this stupid cloak, but you're going to want to grab that. Upgrade it all the way from PvP. Thankfully, you can do that with PvP to upgrade it to rank 6, 730 item level. Put a pure energizing fiber in there if you want to go mastery like I did. And it procs extra damage, which is, like I said, something that Unholy loves. My pet is just wailing on the PvP dummy over there, which is pretty funny. So there's your embellishment, there's your cloak, and of course you're going to grab Forset. Why are you going to grab Forset if it makes you get crit? Well, most of the pieces don't. Look at this. Haste Mastery, haste verse, then you have off stat crit and off stat crit. So a tiny bit of crit, which is not the end of the world, for a Forset bonus, which makes you do way more damage than you're losing from having to get a little bit of crit. And some of the standard pieces are like really good, like this one and this one. So you get a tiny bit of crit on 2 pieces, off stat crit, and you get a Forset, which is always valuable all the time. Death Coil, big damage button, you press it, it's better. You don't have to like set something up to utilize this Forset. It is always valuable, so you will use it. Great. And which Forset pieces are you running? You ask right now to me, and I answer with legs, gloves, chest, and shoulders. This one is Helm is the one with crit main stat, so you do not run that. Insignia, always, because you don't have 1 minute goes as Unholy, so why would you use badge? A Fallen Crusader, always. And then the enchants of the things you've been running, the entire expansion, like this primary stat and stam mod. You get the speed on your boots, Just really not much to say there. The only thing to say there is that I ran leech enchants for bracers and cloak. And the reason for that is that combined with this leech talent, which we'll get to soon, actually gives you a huge chunk of leech. Look at this here. 6%, and you pad so much as Unholy, especially when there's a BM Hunter or another Unholy or a Demo Lock or something with pets just running around and letting you disease everything and pad like crazy. This actually is a ton of extra healing, and it's passive healing, which is great in solo shuffle, excuse me, because you want to do stay as active as possible, and passive healing allows you to chase when that dampening is creeping up and up and up, and you just have a little bit more health to work with to finish off the game. Remember, once somebody dies, the round is over, so if you just narrowly got the kill before they did, you win the round, right? Unless it's too narrow and it counts as a tie, but who cares, whatever. Leech is fun, I use it, I sacrifice on the speed because I have plenty of mobility from Death Charge, and I get a lot of extra self-healing, it's very cool. Okay. That's everything for stats, except for the other unicorn build that, like I promised, I'll talk about at the end. I want to go over the fundamentals first, the stuff that most people will be doing. Now, talents. Here's that regular build, right? You grab the Super Strain, Capstone. I called this one Woundspike. The descriptions will be below. We were still using the funny fantasy names from back when I started War Within, and I was a young optimistic man. How times have changed. No, I'm kidding. Everything's fine. Right, Super Strain, Capstone, gives you extra disease damage, tons of raw pressure that scales with even fever as well, and then gives you extra damage from morbidity, which is just raw damage, and then more shadow damage from death rot. And then you grab Raise A-Bomb. This guy's awesome. He applies wounds, he applies diseases, he pulls people out of stealth, he does damage himself, he summons all of your horsemen all at once when he's popped, which gives you a wall, which gives you more damage. He's just a really, really great button, which of course you have to have one of these. The only time you would use Legion of Souls, I haven't tried it really myself because I live Raise A-Bomb, but double melee or triple melee lobbies, right? This is really good into more melee because it's just a really cleave-centric ability. It doesn't have the extra damage that Raise A-Bomb gets over the whole duration, where he's just meleeing and wounds, melee, wounds, melee, wounds. But a concentrated amount of cleave wounds against double melee is extremely good, so just swap this over into those types of lobbies or comps. Okay. Then Unholy Assault is just massive burst damage. Of course, you're going to run this. Infestor Might, though it is nerfed in PvP, still gives you a lot of stacking strength during your burst when you have so much wound generation from all of your sources of wounds like Infected Claws and Raise A-Bomb. You can just burst, spend it every single global with Death Coil procs or with Clawing Shadows, and get as much strength as possible to make your upfront damage as high as possible. Great. Then everything else, for the most part, in this build, is just like non-negotiable passive talents that are either rotational, like at the top, which we won't even talk about, or just massive extra damage. And Holy Blight gives you extra damage and gives you another disease for morbidity, giving you an extra 2% damage. Even Fever is just way more disease damage. Bursting Swords is way more wound damage. Clawing is, you can actually grab Clawing with those left talents now, which is really cool. And Critical Strikes give you even more festering wound damage, which you don't have much crit, but you do have some from your tier set, so bada bing. Actually kind of useful. But Clawing Shadows, ranged wound bursting pressure, making you like the rep problem where you can always be doing it at damage at a range from your rot, from your Clawing Shadows, from your death coils. It makes it very difficult to peel and very difficult to get away from in solo shuffle, making you able to finish people, especially as dampening wraps up and they're just trying to kite for their life. And just having tools like this, so valuable. I would never swap off that. All the Death Coil mods are so good because Death Coil hits even harder in PvP, and it's at a range again, and it's magical, so it ignores all armor, scales with your mastery. Of course, all of that nonsense. Death Coil is a great button, and you want all the Death Coil mods. You have other mods like Ghoulish Frenzy, which is now on Dark Transform, which is a shorter cooldown because of Apocalypse, and we will get to PvP Town soon, but you can make it even shorter from Necro Bargain, even further extending the value of Ghoulish Frenzy, making it a fantastic talent to pick. We'll talk about PvP Town soon. And then Rotten Touch is nerfed in PvP as well, but with Clawing Shadows being a mainstay of every build and doing so much on-demand damage, having a modifier on this, even if it's nerfed, is just really good. And I think Clawing Shadows is still buffed in PvP, so that kind of, evens it out a little bit. Those Rotten Touch Clawing Shadows are going to hit very, very hard. So this is a very traditional build. There are some choices you can make, like some people have been removing some of the nerfed PvP talents, like Fester Might and Rotten Touch, and going into like a Magus of the Dead, Unholy Pact, maybe even Doomed Bidding, or maybe even Menacing Magus or something similar. And the reason is those talents are nerfed in PvP, the Festermite and the Rotten Touch. And you can just get like, these are kind of buffed in PvP, right? Because when you use Bargain, it reduces the cooldown of Apocalypse, which allows you to get more access to Ghoulish Frenzy damage, but also get more access to Dark Transform, because again, Dark Transform is baked into Apocalypse now. That's part of the rework. So that means Unholy Pact is going to be more often doing more damage. And you're going to Apocalypse more for more Mages of the Dead, and then Mages of the Dead Cleave for more pad, right? So you could play around with some of these just do more damage talents that are benefited from the fact that you have a PvP talent that further reduces the cooldown of APOC, which now further reduces the cooldown of Dark Transform, right? You see how all of that works in tandem? Short cooldowns, more access to more pad, right? And Unholy is a spec with your necrotic wounds and your diseases and your range damage and your pet and your death coils that loves sustained damage. So if you play that whole tree, this is not the crazy build, by the way. This is just little alternate choices that I wanted to tell in the foundation, the standard build that I wanted to show you in case you've seen somebody trying it out or running it on Murloc.io or one of those other sites that allows you to see people's talents, right? There's some people, like I've seen it talked about in the DK Discord, and that's why. I like explaining the why. Why do you see somebody maybe someday with Unholy Pact on their damage meter? Because Bargain reduces the cooldown, allowing you to have a faster APOC for Magus or a faster APOC for Dark Transform, which gives you more Ghoulish Frenzy value and more Unholy Pact. Okay, I've said that 4 times now, so hopefully it's locked in. If not, watch this video again over and over and over. Thank you for padding my watch time. But let's go back to the version of the build that I've been running for all of my pushes and leave it up on the screen just so you can see it for a second. Now, Rider. I always run Rider. The mobility is so great. The sustained damage from all your horsemen and all the horseman modifiers that they give you to all your abilities is just so hard to ignore. You even get either longer horsemen or even more death coil damage if you want to go into Feast of Souls, which you absolutely can. You get a phenomenal wall from Pact of the Apocalypse. You get the mobility, you get the extra damage. It's great. It plays into everything Unholy wants to do to win. So I always run this. And I'm not even going to talk about Sandland until the end. So I always run this. There you go. Now the left side. The left side is really, really locked in for almost everything, right? Some of the stuff at the top left doesn't even need to be talked about. There are some choice talents I'll go over in a second, but you have your AoE blind, you have your wall and your death strike, and your death strike modifiers. Like this one for AMS gives you more cooldown rate on that, which gives you more healing, which increases your death strike healing, of course, because of osmosis, right? You get stamina, which is death strike healing. You get the death strike mod itself. You get haste, which you just want haste. You get your kick. You get, I mean, these like, right, you don't even have to talk about these things. I run double chains instead of the fast kick, though I've seen a lot of people running this. But I like the double chains for peeling people and keeping healers that get a little too close, like throwing chains on them, allowing them to severely lose their movement around the map if they want to go into CC or if they want to try and line CC, right? Just disrupting their movement like that with proliferating chill is super good. Attack speed from Icy Talents gives you more death coil procs, which I love. You get the asphyxia. You get these capstones are just non-negotiable. You get the one with strength, and null magic is just passive. You get the osmosis healing is so good, and it makes physical damage easier to deal with, not because it reduces physical damage, but because before AMS wasn't doing anything into physical damage, but now if they can't break the AMS, you get longer duration osmosis healing. Wow, cool, awesome. Lichborn Wall, more walls, double charge on absolutely everything, including your horse, which is absolutely non-negotiable in every possible way. Vestigial Shell, we're going to talent out of this. This build needs to be updated since the rework. Soul Reaper nowadays. Soul Reaper has a huge PvP mod. Huge. You like how I said that? Yeah, okay. We're not gonna get to that. Right. Soul Reaper has a big PvP mod. And it actually, you can keep people low. People have big health pools. Sometimes they don't spike right back up, especially with the dampening that stacks up in solo shuffle. So we have that finally being playable for the first time in a million years. That's kind of cool. It does spike hit pretty hard, and it scales off your mastery, which makes all of this mastery that you're grabbing give it even more finishing power. So that's kind of a cool tool. But yeah, everything else is pretty standard. Finally, you can do some choices here. So let's go down the choices. You get the brittle choice, you get the Wraith Walk. Let's put that in. This is what I see most people choosing because, and this is why I like explaining the why. It doesn't feel like Death's Reach is that important. 10 yards here, 10 yards there. It is. And here is the reason. Ranged and healers, what do they have on all their abilities? A 40-yard range. Okay, that's very traditional. It's very classic for them to have a 40-yard range. Death Grip starts at 30. So they could always stay just out of range, and it'd be very frustrating until you add this talent, and that's why. You know people use it. You know it feels good to use it, and now you know why it feels so good, right? 40-yard Death Grip really changes the game. So this is what people are running, and of course you grab Enfeeble, which is nerfed in PvP, but it's just a nice way of giving yourself yet another wall that is active as long as you have your pet up, which should be nearly all the time. You get the runeforge, you get extra damage from brittle from your diseases, and you get your D&D cleave, which is fine. You know, if you stack people up, if people are stacked up for any reason, you can get them in a blind, you can get them in a war stomp if you're a cow, and then you can start D&D cleaving them with your proc D&D that you get from Rider of the Apocalypse. The only other thing you would rather do is maybe drop Leech, which I run for the extra self-healing, if you believe that your teammates deserve your cooldowns with Anti-Magic Zone, which I, of course, do not. And there you go. So I'm going to leave that up on the screen because I changed some things. That was some post-rework changes. I've never run Soul Reaper before, so that's pretty neat. And I'm going to leave it right up on the screen for you for 3, 2, 1. And, of course, it's going to be linked in the description below. Now, before we go into the crazy build and all of its insanity, let's just talk about PvP talent. Spell Warden, non-negotiable, I think. It just has too many things it does. It gives it a shorter cooldown, which allows you to have better resistance to magical CC or magical damage, but also against physical comps, it's still amazing because you get more access to osmosis and they can't break it. So you have shorter cooldown and longer duration of osmosis. It allows you to put it on your teammates to get them out of CC as well. Not get them out of, prevent CC. So if they're scattered, you can prevent a trap. If they're casting poly, you can prevent it. If they're about to die, you can prevent that as long as it's magical damage that's coming in. Very good. Other non-negotiables, necrotic wounds. This has been rebuffed, I think, while I was not playing. So 24%. Is that more than it was before? Not sure, but 24% is a lot of stackable Mortal Strike. It does not heal you anymore. Which is fine because they were allowed to buff it back to being, like I said, I think it's buffed. So it's just a really, really good tool for pressure. It stacks with any Mortal Strike, and if you don't have a Mortal Strike, then it gets full value of healing absorption at that 24%. And it's just great. It's just great to have extra healing absorption when you're such a pressure rot-oriented spec. So non-negotiable. Finally, you have a negotiable talent. Bloodforged Armor got buffed as well, so since I stopped playing, so it's good into those warriors hitting you for 6 million mortal strikes or marksmans that I hear are disgusting right now. So, you know, having a 25% wall pretty much on demand anytime you want it. Yeah, that actually matters now. I think 25% for 4 seconds is a good level for this. I think before it was trash, and I think any better and it would be completely broken. So I think this is a good level for it. Then you have an old classic Doomburst has been falling out of favor because Death Coil already bursts a wound. And now because Doomburst only bursts 2 wounds from in total, but only one of them is from Doomburst, it only gets 45% slow instead of 90% slow, unless they fix that while I was gone. But I haven't really bothered to run it because, again, an extra wound is not that big of a deal, especially with Clawing Shadows, allowing you to burst wounds at a range already. So that one's fallen out of favor, so I won't even click it, so you know that that's fallen out of favor. Then we have Strangulate, which is just whenever you have way too many stuns in your comp, like you've got a leg sweep from your Mistweaver and Stormbolt and from your warrior, and you got way too many stuns, or maybe there's a Windwalker on your team, right? And you just want to have a stun into silence go, which is really debilitating because not a lot of classes have a blanket silence. A ton of them have stuns, so stun into silence could kill a healer 100-0 if you set up with your teammates. Very cool. Otherwise, you'll just stay with Asphyxiate because this does replace Asphyxiate, but a 4-second blanket is amazing. I already talked about all the reasons you would run Bargain for better access to Ghoulish Frenzy. It does a little bit of trip damage itself, and it really gets more value when you start adding Unholy Pact and Magus of the Dead. Right? So there's that. Reanimation is a meme, but it's a meme that I appreciate from time to time. And Dark Sim is if you're a baller and you steal a poly to CC a healer with their trinket and win you the game, and then you can put it into your montage on YouTube. Okay? So that's everything. I will go over the rotation at the end. Right now, as I've teased about the entire time, let's make a whack build. Let's do it right now together. Let's do this. Watch this. Hold on. Festermite's nerfed. Let's swap over to Decomposition. Disease Damage Talent. Oh, wait. let's not ruin my woundspike build because I actually kind of already made. Oh, and it's aptly named plaguedoctor. So here they're going to swap right now. Then the other thing I swapped, rotten touch. What is this? Crit strike damage of your diseases increased by 25%. Where have we seen that before? Right. The mastery increases the critical strike damage of your diseases by 26.3%. Plus 25%. That's over 50% critical strike damage for diseases. And you even get some crit chance on foul infections as well as extra disease damage. And you have this disease damage. And now you have this decomposition that has it flare up, dealing 200% of the damage it dealt in the last 4 seconds. The more damage it deals, which means the more crits and more crit damage mods you have, makes your Virulent Plague do more damage, makes decomp do more damage. Do you see where I'm going with this? That's right, guys. The whack build is dropping your haste and going into crit instead of haste. Going verse, mastery, crit, and having as much disease damage as humanly possible. You can get 50% from your mastery and plague mastery, this talent right here that's still on the screen. 50% crit damage on your diseases, then 5% crit chance here, then plus all the crit you can get from gear from swapping off of haste. Get as much crit as you possibly can, and then throw it all into decomposition. And what you're going to have is the ultimate rot. You still get tools like clawing. You can see I have the workings of the entire original build. You still want clawing because now your crit that you're getting on your stats is actually going to make this critical strikes cause the festering wound to burst for 20%. That's going to be active more often, right? And you can still use clawing to do burst and spike damage, which is now going to crit more often, though you're going to have a lot less haste for those globals, but it's going to crit more often for more spike damage. But it's also going to apply Plaguebringer at a range, which means you have this tool to get your Plaguebringer buff up, which is what you didn't have before, right? Because they were on the same, they were choice node, right? They were choice nodes. So now you can have them both at once, allowing you to have access to all of your disease mods at a range. And you can make this rot build that's clawing sustained, death coil sustain with death coil dot, and then disease crit damage crit mod decomposition flaring up, doing all of this rot pressure, all at a range, non-peelable the entire game, no problem. If you can make this build and you can deal with the fact that your globals are going to be so sluggish, you know what's crazy? Haste does not affect your disease damage. It doesn't. Haste does not increase the tick rate of your disease. Oh my God, I'm convincing myself to try this. I am. Haste doesn't affect the tick rate of your diseases. I promise it doesn't. So when you lose all this haste and get crit, you're just getting more disease damage. You're getting it from here. You're getting it from here. You're getting it from your stats. You're getting it from the fact that now after the rework, you can keep Plaguebringer up at a range, and dampening is going to stack up. Dampening is going to stack up, boys. And eventually, your diseases are going to be killing people from anywhere on the map. People are going to be rotting. I have to try it. I'm going to try it. Watch my stream. Soon, I will have the conquest to make this build, and I am going to do it. So again, I'll leave it in the description below. I'll have some notes in my description, but it is crit versus mastery instead of haste. Is it going to feel weird to go no haste? Duh! That's why nobody's done it yet, but it's there. And if you want to try it with me, I think I've convinced myself to try it. You get crit damage here, crit damage here, and crit chance instead of haste. And you go decomposition for the big disease value. And you even get something from where even is it? Critical strikes cause the festering wound. You get some stuff here, boys. It's there. It's there if you want to try it. So that's the crazy build. Okay, peep my stream the next few weeks. Maybe I'll have it finally ready to go. Okay, now the rotation. Let's go back to the other build. Not that the rotation would be really any different at all, but let's just go to the traditional build. We'll talk about the rotation. What is the rotation for Unholy? Spend wounds at a range with clawing shadows when you have wounds on a target. Generate them if and only if you're nearing to be out of wounds. So if you have even 2 wounds, spend them first. If you start generating, you're wasting runes because, by the way, you got Raise A-Bomb. That look at my bars, dude. Look at my bars. This is all of the stuff they changed to. That's so funny since the rework. Anyway, Raise A-bomb applies wounds. Infected Claws applies wounds. You do not get to 6. You just spend them. Spend them all, right? You only burst 1 wound at a time from clawing or from death coil, so spend them all. Here's the opener. Raise A-bomb. He applies your diseases and applies wounds, so you can immediately go into Unholy Assault, then 1 Fester Strike, then APOC, then you just start spending. Don't press any more Festers. Clawing, clawing, coil, clawing, clawing, coil, clawing, clawing, coil. Alternate, alternate, alternate. When you have a proc death coil, you spend it, then you get the Rotten Touch buff to go clawing, 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 then coil, clawing, clawing, coil, clawing. It's just an alternating system. It's like Obliterate and Frost Strike. That's pretty much what it is. So here we go. Watch this burst. Raise A-bomb. Unholy Assault. Your APOC, you don't even need the Fester. Coil, clawing, 1 Fester, coil, clawing, clawing, clawing. There's a coil proc, so of course we're going to spend it next global. Then clawing, coil, clawing, coil, clawing, coil. Yeah, it's yeah. And then if they get low, you press Soul Reaper. Great. And that's how it looks. And then when they lose their diseases, you reapply them. Okay? And that's the whole thing. The only thing you didn't have to do is 1 Fester because Unholy Assault drops 4 wounds. So don't worry about that part. It's literally just Unholy Assault, APOC, then maybe 1 Fester if you don't get a ton of proc wounds, and then you go into the coil clawing, right? So there you go. You saw it on the screen. Watch it 1,000 times if you need to, but I don't think you do because I think you're way smarter than that. That's it, boys. If you need macros or add-ons help, there's another video like beginner's guide or complete DK guide on my channel. Some comps that you could try out. I'm sure Hunter DK would still be awesome. And of course, anything with a Mortal Strike. You probably got TSG still active for you. They're hitting 6 million Mortal Strikes, right? Windwalker DK is always probably going to be good in some way or another. Grip, blind, stun, cleave, everything. Double Mortal Strike effect is so valuable. Necrotic Wounds plus MS, Necrotic Wounds plus the Rising Sun Kick debuff, or Hunter from their pets, right? 2s, you just play with a healer that can keep you aggressive. I don't play any 2s at all. There's already too many brackets it is. There's Solo Shuffle, BG Blitz, RBGs, 2s, 3s. 2s is kind of fallen off for me. But just play with the healer and do a lot of sustained damage and run people out of cooldowns. Dampening stacks up, you get even more pressure. There you go. Check out my other videos if you need macros or add-ons help, and pop into my stream if you want to see this ridiculous build come to fruition. I can't wait to see you guys in a future video, and see you around.